All right. True MIT fashion, I left this presentation to the last minute, so my wife and I were just putting the finishing touches on it, but all good. Okay, hello everyone here. Who here is from MIT? Okay, and then how many non-MIT folks do we have here? Okay, fantastic. Hopefully this will be relevant for you as well. Any Ivy League folks here actually as well? All right, my wife's an Ivy League person, so we can count that for one. But I am here to talk about how to beat the Ivy League at career success. I want to actually just start out by saying that career success, I want to be clear, is only one aspect of life, okay? There's lots of other important aspects and parts to life, and so this, I'm not saying career success is the only thing that you should be doing or focused on or to the exclusion of all else. There's a lot of other important things like friends and family, like other interests. But this talk specifically is about career success and the things I've learned since graduating from MIT 15 years ago. And so that's what I'm going to be focusing on here. Again, I'm not saying this is the correct religion or the correct way to live your life, but I do think there are some really interesting learnings that particularly MIT students can take away from, okay, what is it that you do learn at MIT and what are the things you don't and how can you leverage those things into building a great career and a very massively outsized successful career and beat the Ivy League along the way. So a little bit about Amplitude. For those of you who don't know, Amplitude was founded in 2012. Today, we are the leading digital analytics company out on the market. We work with tons of companies out there, from Fortune 500 companies like Walmart, NBC, Ford, to tech companies like DoorDash and Atlassian, to very, very small companies and kind of everything in between. We've built an amazing business, $300 million in revenue, 700 people, still growing. We're the only public company in our category. I wanted to just spend 2 minutes talking about my journey, just so you have an understanding of where I'm coming from. I'm not going to go through every little last thing, but 15 years ago, I was actually in the exact same seats as all of you, taking lectures, here in the classroom here, listening to professors, coming to talks by entrepreneurs, thinking, hey, who am I? Can I possibly do this? Is this something that I can achieve as well? Or is this totally out of my dreams? So if you're like me, not too different, you can absolutely do similar things. I was actually a very, very mediocre MIT student. So I was course 20 at the time, biological engineering. And I had a B+ average, so I didn't even have like a particularly good average, very kind of middle of the road. Got A's and B's and even some C's in classes. I didn't stand out in any particular way for the vast majority of my time at MIT. I wasn't like president of any clubs or like do anything really cool. I got very lucky in that we competed in Battlecode my junior year, and we got lucky enough to win first place that year, and that kind of launched us into the startup world and into the kind of trajectory that I am on today. Fast forward all the way today. As I mentioned, we're a public company, massive organization out there. We're thinking about how do you go from 300 million in revenue to $1 billion in revenue, and then once we get to $1 billion in revenue, we'll be thinking about how to go to 2 billion. My goal is to build a generational tech company that stands the test of time, that even after I leave and move on from it, will continue being there and being very successful and making a ever so small impact on the world in its own way. So I wanted to share, as part of that journey, a question that I started out with that started actually back when I was at MIT, that I've been thinking about for all this time, and that has culminated in today's talk. All right, so this movie, The Social Network, came out the year I graduated from MIT. And I remember asking myself at the time and seeing Mark Zuckerberg leave Facebook, and I was thinking to myself, why the fuck was this started by a Harvard grad? This is like the one position of career success that could have been started by someone from MIT. Okay, so like, other positions of career success, like if you're president of the United States, all right, that person not gonna come from MIT. I'm cool with it. I'm like, I've accepted that. If you're a top athlete or entertainer, like if you're interviewing Patrick Mahomes at the Super Bowl and you're like, what school did you come from? I would bet you like 1,000,000,000 to 1, he's not going to say MIT. And I'm totally cool and comfortable with it. But the one position of career success that I always felt that as an MIT student, an MIT alum should be able to achieve is building a massively successful tech company. But yet again, even though, if you kind of look back, Microsoft was started by Gates, and the latest big tech company success, Facebook, was started by Zuckerberg, and I was like, okay, how do we get this? Why isn't this guy from MIT? And how do we get the next one that gets created to come from MIT? And what do we have to do to make that happen? Turns out I'm actually not the only person to ask this question. Literally, as I was preparing for this talk and thinking about today, literally this Reddit thread coincidentally popped up on my feed. So this is from the MIT admissions subreddit and asked the exact same question. So of the big 5 tech companies, Microsoft, Google, Facebook, Amazon, and Apple, why were none of them started by MIT founders, right? You got 2 Harvard grads in there, a Princeton grad, one from Berkeley, and one from Stanford. So how do we, what's going on? I thought this reason was very interesting. Okay, hey, it's just not the goal of the school. We don't stand for career success at MIT. The mission is all about advancing knowledge and tackling global challenges through science, engineering, and technology, and working for the betterment of humankind, which means we care about creating more impactful solutions than just turning out billion-dollar companies. I think this is an oxymoron. I think one of the best ways to improve people's quality of life is by starting massively successful companies. If I compare my life today to my life 20 years ago and think about where the biggest improvements in quality of life have come from, it has come from the rise of technology. I am now able to keep in touch with friends and family from around the world all the time because of the wonderful things on the internet and social media that has come with it. I have now access to an incredible amount of information that we've never had before, that any individual in the human race have never had before because of the rise of the technology industry. I have access to fantastic services like Uber and DoorDash and all these other things that can help me improve my life and get things done. Same with how I work. We're way more effective at work because of technology. And even if you look at the folks who are the poorest of the poor, if you go to developing countries in Africa and you look at how their quality of life has changed over the last 20 years, the exact same phenomenon. It's because of the rise of technology and the internet that has made their lives way better today. They're now able to start businesses. They're now able to keep in touch. They have the exact same desires as we do. And so I am a very, very strong believer in the power of both technology and companies who build technology to improve the world's problems and improve our quality of life. And so to me, this is an oxymoron. To me, being successful at your career is improving the world in your own small way. And so how can we here at MIT do that at the highest level? All right, here is another one. Again, we're busy solving the world's problems. Again, I argue that it's not that yes, research is important, and yes, solving hard technical problems are important, but it doesn't matter if you don't get them in people's hands. And the way you do that is by building businesses and building organizations that do that, aka big tech companies. This one was actually one of my favorites, which is like big tech founders don't come from the middle class or lower. They come from the rich. Rich people pull strings to get their kids into colleges. MIT doesn't do that legacy admission shit. So I'm actually very proud of this, the fact that in terms of meritocratic colleges, like top of the list. We don't have legacy admissions. We don't have like all these other categories of sports or whatever that can get you into the school. It's strictly based on merit, which is an amazing and phenomenal thing. I'd actually argue that some of the things that you learn from being from a rich family actually are things that I think MIT students could benefit and learn from, and therefore go on to achieve greater career success in life. This school is absolutely incredible, world class, the #1 at technical knowledge. If you come out of here, you are the smartest of the smartest of the smart in the entire world. And that is an incredible place to be. But there are also other really important things outside of that that you have to learn as well in order to have career success. So I want to go into some of them today, and hopefully at the end of this talk, you'll have at least a little bit of a roadmap of what some of those things might be. All right, so there's three key lessons that I want to go through and hope all of you take away today. The first is learn how to sell. The second is judge and be judged. And the third is don't quit. So let's go ahead and get into it. The #1 thing I want you to take away in terms of career success is sales. This is the most important skill by far. This is the #1 thing I have developed as an individual and as a leader in the 15 years since leaving MIT, and it is the driver of Amplitude success. It is the driver of my personal success career-wise. And if you kind of look at the core skill that MIT doesn't really teach you, this is the really big one. And I actually first start out by debunking a big misconception, and that is sales is a dirty word and a dirty skill. Okay, so when I say sales, what do you guys think of? What comes to your mind when I say, hey, someone really good at sales? Like they're a really good salesperson, they're a really good seller. What's the stereotype or the image that you might have in your mind? Car dealership, incredible. How did I know you were going to say that? Incredible, incredible, absolutely. We have the impression, we think of the used car dealer, okay, that's trying to pull one over, that's trying to convince us that that used car still works even when it doesn't, that's trying to extract the maximum dollars. We think of it as a low status profession, and we don't want to be associated with this. Hey, we're here to achieve higher and mightier and more abstract, and better, higher status things. And part of what I want to share with you is this is actually the wrong way to think about what great sales is. Yes, this is kind of probably the lowest status form of sales. Actually, you know what? I'd put lower status than this. If you are part of a multi-level marketing scheme like Amway or Cutco, that's probably even worse. I'd recommend get into used cars instead of doing that. But yeah, you probably want to graduate beyond used cars in terms of learning how to be a great salesperson. All right, let me tell you my own journey from a sales standpoint. And why it was the core driver of Amplitude's success. So this actually took me personally a while to learn. Before we started Amplitude, we had another company named Sonalite, which was a voice recognition company that helped you. It was like a version of Siri, except for Android phones, and it helped you send and receive text messages. So you could talk to your phone and talk back to you. Long story, but didn't end up going anywhere. We had some okay success, and after a year of working on it, we decided to shut the company down. That led then into Amplitude. For the first entire year of Amplitude, we were building a product. We looked at the analytics market. We said, hey, we know we can build a better product than anyone else out there, so let's go do it. And we spent a year kind of in a cave by ourselves building away, and that was probably one of the biggest mistakes. We burned a year. We got some good product, but we actually did not spend nearly enough time on this side of sales. After about a year into the business, anyway, we basically begged companies to use it. We said, hey, use it for free. Maybe pay us later in the future if you feel you get any value, and then we'll try to iterate and create something valuable from there. So I remember the very first time we actually sold this product. It was mid-2013, so about a year into starting Amplitude. And I get introduced to this company called Super Lucky Casino. So Super Lucky Casino, this mobile slots game, as you see here, they make hot Vegas casino slot machines. So if you want, so they're very good at doing this. It was started by some Zynga alums, and so they're really good at optimizing, making mobile social apps. And we go in to meet the co-founder and CTO of the business, this guy named Brett Terrell. We give him the demo. It's about a 15-minute demo. We kind of show him all the cool things you do in Amplitude. Look, you can look at a segment, this chart here, and look at a retention graph, and look at the behavior of these users. And we get to the end of the demo. And at the end of the demo, he asks a question that I had never been asked before in my life. The question he asked me is, how much does this cost? And I was like stunned and frozen. And I'm like, I'm thinking to myself, what do I say? Like, I've never gotten that question before. And I was like, okay, what's the advice on what to say when someone asks you how much does something cost? Well, the advice, if you look up on the internet, it'll say, hey, ask for as much as you possibly can with a straight face. So in my mind, going into that conversation, I was like, all right, what does SaaS cost? And I was like, oh, well, maybe $50 a month. That's like a good price for like a B2B application. But then I remembered the advice, and I'm like, no. I got to ask for a bigger number. What is a bigger number than $50 a month? $100 a month. That's twice as big. So maybe I should ask for that. And then right before I say $100 a month, I'm like, no. That's still too small. You got to go even bigger. What's the biggest number I can possibly think of in this moment? $1,000 a month. So I yell out $1,000 a month, with as much confidence and conviction I have in that moment. And to my incredible surprise, he goes, wow, that's so cheap. And I was like, hallelujah, thank God I asked for $1,000 a month and not something smaller. And in that moment, we made our first sale at Amplitude. And all my dreams of building a technology business and creating something valuable that someone actually bought emotionally were fulfilled in that moment. I'm like, man, we could totally fail and flame out and go out of business. But the fact that I sold some software to someone, that makes us awesome. And like that means we actually were a legit business instead of just this like stupid little side project. Like we're legit. So I was very, very happy. And then soon after that, I got on the sales train. So we launched the product in February of 2014. The very next company that we did business with was this company called KeepSafe. It does mobile photo applications. And there we asked, what's bigger than $1,000 a month? $2,000 a month. So we asked for $2,000 a month. I then hired a sales coach to teach me full-time how do I get good at sales, because I knew I was terrible at this skill. I'd learned all these great technical skills from MIT, but I was absolutely terrible at knowing how to sell to someone. And I learned all sorts of great stuff. By the way, one of my strong recommendations is if you're building a business and you're trying to learn this skill, hire someone to coach you and teach you this. There's tons of people who are willing to transmit their knowledge, especially to great engineers and folks like us. And so I cannot that is one of the highest leverage things you can do and one of the best ways to get better at the skill. So we worked with this guy named Mitch Morando, and we started closing business left and right. The next company we got, it was The Hunt, and that was for $3,000 a month. Then there was this one called Nokia that had this product called Here Maps, Nokia, the phone company. And I was like, wow, it's a legit company. It actually wants to buy us. And so we charged them $4,000 a month. And then we charged this company $6,000. And then we charged Rdio, this music streaming service, $8,000 a month. And then we charged this company $10,000 a month. And then we started realizing, okay, this is probably the limit, of what we can charge people. But our trajectory as a business kind of took off like that. We grew from $0 in revenue to about $1 million in annual recurring revenue just in the space of 9 months. So, 2 years before that, 1 year building Sonalight, 1 year building Amplitude, 0 revenue, totally flat. I switched full-time from building the product to selling it, 0 to $1 million in 9 months. And so that was the driver of early success. And then after that year, we compounded it. So I was like, okay, we got to just keep doing this loop over and over again. So after 2014, we ended that year at $1 million in ARR. 2015, $4.5 million. 2016, $13 million. 2017, $31 million. 2018, $53 million, on and on and on, and eventually $100 million. Next thing you know, I'm here 15 years later, with a $300 million business. But incredibly important. If I hadn't done that, if I hadn't embraced learning how to sell full time, I wouldn't be here talking to you. I probably would have gotten a group of maybe like 10 people here in the front row, and that would have been it. Very, very important skill to the success of Amplitude. The other thing I wanted to talk about here is this is also an incredibly important skill, even if you're not building a B2B business where the main motion is selling by talking to customers. Even if you're building a consumer business or any type of business, this is incredibly important because there are tons of people you have to convince to work with you in order to be successful. You have to convince investors to invest in the company that you're doing. You have to convince your co-founders to come join you. You have to convince future employees of the mission you're on. You have to convince the organization you build of the direction you're going in. You have to convince your users or customers or whoever they are to use your product and work with you. So incredibly, incredibly important skill. And by the way, this is important even if you don't decide to become a founder or CEO. One of the things that I always tell folks starting out early in their career is that you are the CEO of your own career, okay? There's no one else that is as incentivized for your success as yourself. And so wherever you end up, don't think that you're going to go off to some system and they're going to be a perfect arbiter of truth. That is not how the real world works at all. You have to be selling. Nobody cares. Like, that's the default stare. Nobody cares about what you're doing. And so you have to go out there and sell yourself and sell whatever it is you're doing and sell your vision of what you want. Okay, back to Amplitude for a second. The second thing I want to point out is that for Amplitude's business and for any B2B business, sales is half of the loop that drives success. So you need to build a product, you then sell that product to people. The money that you get from selling that product allows you to reinvest money into building an even better product, and that allows you to sell the product to even more people. And then you do that again and again and again and again. And however good at that loop you are, that's your success as a business. And so, we've gotten to the 300 million in ARR mark, and I'm thinking now, again, how do I get to $1 billion? How do I get to 2 billion? How do I get to far beyond it? And this is kind of the core motion of the company. And again, even if you're not a B2B company, this is still the same thing, is how do you drive compounding success? It's you build a great product and you sell it in whatever form that takes. Okay, I want to talk really quickly about the market we were in and some of the competition that we have had. This is actually the single biggest reason that we have become the leading company in the digital analytics market. So I want to introduce you to some of the folks that we have competed against over the last 13 years since starting Amplitude. So the first one is this company called Mixpanel. So Mixpanel actually started a few years before us. Was started by a former intern who had worked with Max Levchin of the PayPal Mafia. They were one of the premier investments of this top venture capital firm called Andreessen Horowitz, so much so that Mixpanel actually got profiled in the New Yorker alongside a profile of the founder of Andreessen Horowitz, Marc Andreessen, right? So, in terms of Silicon Valley status, like elite of the elite that we were competing with against. All right, second company I want to talk about, Heap. Heap started by 3 Stanford alums. And, about as in the network of Silicon Valley as you can get, hey, we're all the way here on the East Coast doing other things here at MIT, but very, very well connected, had worked, I think one of the founders had worked at a previous startup before that had done Y Combinator, so very, very plugged in to the ecosystem and, very connected, and when you think about, hey, career success, you probably bet on a Stanford team beating out an MIT team by default. Last one I want to introduce you to is Interana. So this was actually started by an ex-Facebook team. So a bunch of Facebook engineers who had built their internal data analytics system had then gone out to start a company based around digital analytics. And the founder CEO actually went to Stanford GSB. So not only they got Stanford on me, they got business school on me. So you're talking like in terms of status, like way higher up here. So what was the difference between Amplitude and all of these companies? Why, so if you look at these companies today, Mixpanel is about $100 million business. CEO founder left 7 years ago. Heap, about $60 million business. Interana got acquired in a talent acquisition. So business isn't around today. What was the difference? I actually got to talk to the founders of all 3 of these businesses. So Interana, I talked to when they sold about 6 or 7 years ago, and Mixpanel and Heap. We were very bitter enemies and rivals for a while, so we didn't talk to each other for the longest time. But I'm like, I should just reach out to these guys just to say hello. So I talked to both the Mixpanel founders and the Heap founders, and what they said was, when we looked and retrospected on, hey, we've all built great companies, great products. In some ways, both Mixpanel and Heap were better products at various points in time than Amplitude. Why did they think Amplitude had been a little bit more successful? And we agreed it was sales. In Mixpanel's case, the founder there, this brilliant guy, Suhail Doshi, product genius, create a better designed product, absolutely wonderful user experience, much better actually if you're starting out using analytics for the first time than Amplitude for a while. And it wasn't until more recently we've caught up. And what he told me was he tried to give sales a shot, and they spent 2 years on it, but then they couldn't figure out how to get returns from it, and so gave up. Whereas for us, right, I'd been doing it since day one, or not day one, but since 2014, since the early days of the business. I wasn't trying to grow the business in any other way, and so it was baked into the DNA of Amplitude. Heap, same thing. The founder got to a certain stage, and he realized in order to take his business to the next level, he would have to learn how to sell and become a full-time salesperson, and he didn't want to do that. So he hired in another CEO, left the business, moved on, and they ended up doing a reasonable exit to another company a bunch of years later. And so even though I was a terrible salesperson starting out, and even though I was I didn't know what I was doing and all of that, just by saying, hey, I'm crap at this, but let me try to figure it out, that got us to first place in an incredibly competitive market. There's one other point I wanted to make on this one. I'll come back to it. Okay, so here is maybe a little bit of a framework I like to talk to students about how to think about the power of learning even a little bit of sales. So, I think of, you can kind of think of these on orthogonal axes. So technical skills over here and sales skills over here. And so if all you do in life, and then these here are what I think of as like equivalence success curves. So like this is kind of entry-level success, this is like medium success, this is good success, and it kind of keeps going. And so I think of it as your career success as the product of these two things. And so if you end up with massive technical skill but no sales skill, like your incremental advantage from going deeper on the technical side is none. You actually get a lot more value going here. And you don't even have to go that far to get good success. You guys ever heard the joke, what is the difference between a math PhD and a large pizza? A large pizza can feed a family of 4. So it's like, if you're only going on this axis and you go deep on this axis, there is a limit. Your career success is so much more tightly bounded and so much smaller. Whereas if you go a little bit, even if you're not very high, if you go a little bit this way, you'll compound a lot better. I remember what I was going to say. One of the misconceptions that I personally had when I was getting out into industry, I remember being at MIT, I was median student, and I was like, okay, is it even worth to learn this? Because, I look at all these Ivy League bros and they're like, way better at me than these status games. Should I even try on this thing? And then on top of that, I was also scared to go out to Silicon Valley because I thought in order to start a company, you need to be this like super elite technical person. You need to be incredibly smart and hyper technical. And I was just average. I wasn't top. And could I actually compete out in Silicon Valley? My biggest shock in going to Silicon Valley was that the average technical skill was like an order of magnitude lower than it is here at MIT. So just by virtue of being here, even if you're the worst person in your graduating class at MIT, you are going to wipe the floor with anyone out in Silicon Valley, okay? And so you're going to be all the way up here. And it's good to be all the way up here, right? Because this actually matters, right? If you're only learning sales skills, there's only so far. You've got to learn some technology. And I'll show some examples of this in a little bit. And it's really the product of these two. So my advice to you is, while you're here, get a great technical education. And wherever you end up, even if you're not the best in the class, even if you're the worst in the class, you're going to be set up phenomenally well to do well career-wise. Okay, last thing I want to talk about on the status front is this is a list of Fortune 500, or some of the Fortune 500. You know what these people are? They're all salespeople. Every single last one of them. And I don't even mean, if you look at their career trajectories and how they've become successful, you might think, oh, they were some general manager. No. By and large, these folks started out as salespeople and are really insanely good at sales. They're selling executives that they want to hire. They're selling customers. They're selling public markets. They're selling their organization on their plans. Like, that's all they do all day long. And they're world-class at it, and that's why they get to be in the positions that they are. And so I think, again, I want to reorient your view of what sales is from low status to extremely high status. Now, they may not call themselves salespeople, but that's really what they are. So don't be afraid of the skill and lean into it. Okay, all right. Let's go to the second part. Judge and be judged. So I purposely chose a provocative title for this section. So I grew up Catholic, and one of the things that they absolutely beat into you early on in the church is Jesus has this saying, judge not lest ye be judged. And it actually is a wonderful way to run a society, and there's some really, really good principles. And I think actually MIT of a lot of places embraces this ethos. Like, I actually look back very fondly at my time here. Like, I think of MIT as this wonderful communist utopia where like everyone's super welcoming, no one's like very judgmental, no one plays stupid status games and tries to exclude you or anything. Like, you can be friends with whoever you want, be in whatever interest you want. People are very welcoming and kind, and I absolutely loved it. Now, so while it might be a great way to live in a society, and while it might be a great way to create a wonderful environment like MIT, this is a terrible way for running a company. And here's why this is so important. Because someone needs to do it. Someone needs to judge at a company who is and is not part of the team. Someone needs to do it. And people have tried reinventing this in all sorts of ways. They'd be like, okay, we're going to create a company with no managers, and it's just going to be consensus. And you know what happens then? Well, it actually gets judged through back channels and unofficial ways, and that gets even more political and even terrible. Someone needs the job of judging who is part of the group and who is not part of the group. And so if your goal is career success and to be in charge of your own destiny, this is a judgment on people is an incredibly important skill to develop. And it might as well be you, for what it's worth. You have to figure out who you should work with as co-founder, who you should work with as investor, who you should work with as board member, who you work with as executive. I've actually talked to so many MIT entrepreneurs who have done this poorly, gotten to work with really crappy investors who then screwed them out of their companies, or worked with toxic executives that that pushed them out and played all sorts of political maneuvering games on them. And so if you do not want that to happen to you, this is judgment on people is a very, very important skill to develop. One other thing, just because you're really high on the technical axis that we went back here, doesn't actually mean you can't be CEO. You actually, can and should be CEO. I think, if you actually look at it, Gates was incredibly technical, the strongest technical mind, and was CEO of Microsoft and led that to become one of the best B2B successes in the last 40 years. Same with Zuckerberg at Facebook. So, you can be the CEO as well. Don't think you can't. This is actually compared to sales, this is actually a much easier skill to develop. But a very important one, because if you don't do it right, you can create the wrong team and screw up what you're doing. Okay, let me talk about some of the things that I've done here. Okay, first judgment was who to work with as co-founders. Frankly, here, I'm going to just be direct with you guys. I got very lucky. I got incredibly lucky on this front. So these are my two co-founders, Curtis Liu and Jeffrey Wang. Curtis, when I was graduating, I started to get really excited. I went to talks like this, and I got really excited about building my own business. And I said, okay, well, let me try to convince some of my classmates to do this. I pitched probably about 20 different people on starting a company with me, and none of them wanted to do it. All of them would be like, yeah, that sounds cool, but I want to work a bunch of years first, or, I don't know if that's for me. So, the one exception was my current co-founder, Curtis Liu. And what he said was like, look, I'll work with you, But I want to go get a little bit of experience first at Google. I'm going to work for a year at Google first, and then I'm really interested in learning how to build a company with you. And I'm like, man, if he goes to Google, he is like never going to fucking come out of that thing. Like he's going to get high pay, his standards of living is going to go up, he's going to get this like 4 meals a day in their cafeterias, he's going to like play in their ball pits, he's just going to have like all this fun. He's going to be like, man, fucking work at a company with no track, like why would I want to do that? So anyway, we worked together on nights and weekends and on different projects, and other folks would come in and out, but the two constant on it were me and Curtis. And after about a year of doing that, I came out to California. I'm like, hey, let's work together. And we actually ended up being a very good pair of co-founders. We were very, very lucky. He is twice as good, probably much more than that, as an engineer than I was at that time. And he also brought a lot of kind of great qualities to the partnership. He's very, very stable and steady. I get high highs, low lows. You can kind of get very emotional. One of the most important lessons, one of the most important things is, hey, how can you be steady over a very long period of time? So we ended up being quite a good match for each other. Jeffrey came in a few years later. He was a friend of a friend. He actually is a Stanford guy. And he had actually been working on a number of startups that failed, wanted to go for another startup after that. And I'm like, man, you're crazy, but like, all right, let's do it. And joined our team, and we're kind of off to the races. The reason I bring up both the three of us as a co-founding team is we are all three still working at Amplitude today, 13 years later. That is incredibly rare. First, it's even rare for a founder CEO to last 13 years. And then you talk about other co-founders, like the drop-off rate is like 95%. I could not have built the business without these two, and they play hugely important roles in the business today. Curtis keeps me steady. He's a member of the board. Jeffrey leads our. The reason we are technically excellent is frankly because of Jeffrey. Jeffrey's like, so Curtis is twice as good as me. Jeffrey is twice as good as Curtis, and so it's like they allow us to build the incredible product and have the technical excellence, and that allows us to win in the market that we do. So very, very important part. In retrospect, I'm actually lucky that all the 19 other folks said no to me, and that these ones said yes. All right. After co-founders, I want to tell you about the next most important judgment that I had to make that caused Amplitude what it was to be today, which is our Series A investor. Okay, so typically, as part of, if you build a business and you want to raise money, at some point you'll raise your Series A. And your Series A is like your first real round, where investors commit a significant amount of capital to the business. And you're also typically going to give them a board seat as part of the business. And this is actually incredibly important because they're probably going to be one of your closest business partner in kind of scaling up the business. And there are so many horror stories, investors and board members screwing over founders. Actually, quick question to the audience. I think I asked this to some groups, so if you've heard me ask this before, don't reply. But does anyone know what the function of a board of directors is? Like they have one, like there's a bunch of shit that it says on paper they got to do legally, but they really only have one role. Does anyone want to take a guess as to what that role is? Yes. Make money off of you. Believe it or not, no, that is not the purpose of the board of directors. They do have a responsibility to be fiduciaries for the company and to do that, but they can't actually do anything directly on that. Yes. Increase the value. Indirectly, yes, everyone associated with the company, but what's their mechanism? How do they actually do it? Yes. What's that? Choose the CEO. Very good, very good. So yes, this is the one function and one function only of a board of directors. And even more so than choose the CEO, really the only lever you have to pull is to fire the current CEO. Because either you're running with the current team you have and the CEO's running the thing. Like the board can't do anything, like they're not in the business, so their only lever is to choose the CEO. So as a founder, when you're adding someone to the board of directors, it's the closest thing to adding to a boss that you can get when you're CEO. And so trust is really important. You can hear all sorts of stories about how board members have screwed over CEOs and founders and forced them out of their own companies. If you guys watch The Social Network, Sean Parker famously was forced out by one of his investors. And there's this scene at the end where he tells Zuckerberg to go into this conference room and like flip them all off and tell him Sean Parker sent him. And that's actually based on a real experience he had with one of his former investors, Sequoia. So this happens all the freaking time. And so your judgment in choosing who you're going to add is incredibly important. So a little bit on how we ended up choosing Eric. We were very lucky. So we had grown from 0 to $1 million in ARR in 9 months. So we were a hot company. A lot of investors wanted to put in money. We got 5 different term sheets. So 5 people wanted to put in, invest for a Series A and join the board. 2 of them were kind of, we weren't seriously considering. And then one of those investors was this guy named Ronnie Conway at A Capital. And he had the best deal ever for us. He was like, we're going to give you a really high valuation. It's going to be like 36 or 32 million post or pre, and then we're going to only invest a small amount, like $5.5 million, which is actually a good thing because you don't get diluted. They own less of your company, so we're only going to own 12% of your company, and I'm not even going to take a board seat, so I can't even have the partial control to fire you in the future. And I'm like, wow, this sounds like great. Like, I want to work with Ronnie. Eric ended up coming in at the last second, and I actually never heard of Eric or his firm, Benchmark. After he gave us an offer, I started to kind of look into what they had done more, and I was blown away. At the time, they had invested in half of the massively successful companies in Silicon Valley. So they started actually investing back in eBay. That was kind of their first big claim to fame. But then they had done Twitter and Instagram and Zillow and Snapchat and Zendesk and New Relic. And so you go on the list, you're like, holy fuck, these guys are really good. And so conditioned on the fact that you're in their portfolio, your chance of success is incredibly high, very, very high. And so that caused me and Curtis and Jeffrey a lot of introspection about okay, who do we actually want to partner with and work with? And we came back to the answer. It's look, we're in this because we want to make it go as big as possible. And so I don't know how much this is correlation versus causation, but to the extent it's causation, we want every bit of that we can get. And so it was a much worse offer. They were at, the offer was at 24 million pre, so it was a third less on price. It was 8 million, so they're going to take 25% of the companies. They're going to get a board seat, so he would have a say in firing me in the future. I was like, but I look back on that, and that was one of the best judgments I had made. And that was because I think about who has taught me most about this judge thing, about how to be an effective judge over the last decade, and Eric by far. Amplitude would be 1/3 of the size it was today if it weren't for him. So he's interviewed every single executive, hundreds of executives that we've talked to. He's helped out during incredible crisis moments in the company. He's helped, he helps me just manage my psychology. I remember the first time I built out an executive team, there was this one member of the team who was causing me problems and started doing all this stuff I didn't want her to do. And I remember calling up Eric, and I'm like, I don't know what to do. They keep, working on things. I tell them when I've told them not to. I guess it's just not my company anymore. And he told me, he was like, Spencer, you are the CEO. It is your fucking company. You're the CEO. And he just kept repeating that over and over and over again. And that gave me the confidence I needed to do to exit this person from the business and set things how I thought was correct for us, for our success. And that repeated again and again and again over a decade led to some amazing compounding success. So very, very lucky to work with him. All right, last part I want to share with you on judgment of talent is hiring executives. So any great product and any great business is the result of a team. I have very little to do with it these days, very, very little to do with it. One of my big roles is to decide to recruit and hire and decide who is in the executive team. And it's very important to get right. If you we have the standard corporate website with the professional looking headshots and our about page to show that we're a legit company. But every single one of these people, it was important. That was a thought through process on, okay, is this person the right fit for the business? And this group, for what it's worth, has turned over. I think this is the 3rd team that we're on. So we had to go through 2 different teams before this, and it was just, not bad or good. That's just, hey, you get a team for one stage, and you go to the team to the next stage, and go to the team for the 3rd stage. Let me tell you a really important, one of the really important ways that I use to evaluate whether someone should be a part of this team or not. and that is references. Particularly if you're hiring an executive for their experience, references should be a majority of your evaluation in the decision process about whether to bring them on to the team. So on average, I'll do about 15 to 20 references for a member of the executive, so a lot, executive team. I spend more time on that than on the interview process itself. In some cases, I've gone up to 30, like for my president, Thomas, because I wanted to make sure that partnership and that fit was really, really tight, and I was delegating, Frank, 2/3 of the organization and the entire business side of it to him. And so, minimum I've done on this group is 10. And the reason is because one of the best predictors of future behavior is past behavior. And so you want to know how they've been. Not just are they talented, but how they work as part of a team. Are they going to try to screw you over? Have they done anything unethical? Or will they be a cultural fit to your organization? All of those judgments are super, super freaking important. And look, nobody's perfect. I'm not perfect. Everyone has gray to them, but you want to know, are they going to be the right fit for your team, both in terms of competence and more importantly, in terms of culture? Like, are they going to have the right ethos and the right values to help your organization succeed? And again, you talk to a lot of bitter entrepreneurs who got screwed over. One of the things they'll point to is like, hey, I hired an executive team I didn't like or I didn't feel good about, or that got out of my control, and yeah. And then same thing on the board side. So board of directors. All right. So to bring you a little more in the corporate drama, if you ever want to fire a CEO, you got to convince a majority of the board of directors. Typically on boards, a majority of the directors can vote to remove the CEO. So on this board, we got me and Curtis as 2 out of 9 votes, but we got 7 other people here who could freaking fire us and vote us out anytime. And so we want to be very, very sure, are they aligned to what we're doing? Now look, I don't want someone who's just going to be a yes person to me. I want someone who has the long interest of the business at heart. And I want someone who, if it comes time to say, hey, I think we need a different CEO than you at Spencer, I would trust that judgment. So that is incredibly important. And the biggest mistake I see entrepreneurs who are dedicated and hardworking and smart and savvy make is on the judgment part when it comes to either adding executives or adding board members. All right, last thing I wanted to share with you here is a little bit of a funny joke, but actually has been one of the best ways I've learned in the last 9 years on judgment. Let me tell you one of the luckiest ways that I've learned about how to judge other talent and how to judge other folks. Right, so folks at the Ivy League, much better than us at this. They play all sorts of silly status games, and at MIT, we're just happy to be here and happy to be around other folks. And so how do we get really sharp at judging people? One of the best ways to do that is to marry someone from the Ivy League. So I was incredibly lucky that I got to marry my wife, Anne. And she has helped me hone this judgment on people over our 9 years of partnership. And so she's actually a Princeton alum. And the story of how we got together, that's a whole thing for another time. But in all seriousness, like partnerships, whether you marry them, whether you found companies with them, whether you add them to your board, of people who are good at this and understanding how to judge, are incredibly important for your success career-wise. Okay. All right. Well, that brings me to my last one, which is don't quit. You will hear this from anyone who has achieved anything of consequence in life. So I don't want to belabor it. I just want to give you kind of a few highlights and primary data points from my personal experience on this. So the first thing to understand is in this journey, the drop-off is real fucking strong. Like, you look at the funnel and how many people get here. From where we started as MIT grads, it's very, very small. All right, let me tell you the first one that happens. When we got into Y Combinator, so we did winter 2012 batch, and we were like really happy to be there. We're like made it. Someone who has some judgment ability, who has great judgment ability, said we're worthy of doing this thing. So great, we're awesome. Like, let's make the most of our YC experience. One of the biggest personal shockers was that. To me, while doing YC, is that, so we were 60 companies in our batch. 20 of those companies, so a third of the companies, had major issues between co-founders during the batch. And I thought that was the craziest shit ever. I'm like, you just fucking made it and you're fucking fighting? What the fuck is wrong with you? Like, focus on winning and building a great business together. Like, don't let that stuff tear you apart. Curtis and I actually had made a commitment of, hey, we were gonna work together for 2 years no matter what. Probably about half the companies in our YC batch gave up within that span of 2 years. So like very, very steep drop, So if all you do is just survive 2 years of as founders together, like you're already ahead of half of YC companies, okay? And now lucky, 13 years, we're still working very strong together. Second big drop-off that happens is first set of executives. So okay, that's the first one, co-founder conflicts. Sinks, if you kind of hear about startups breaking up, number one cause of startup death. If all you do is stick together and don't quit, you'll go way further than anyone else. Second big drop-off that I've seen that happens is when you hire the first set of executives. You are hiring and adding to your team on the basis of a skill set that you don't have, and it makes you feel very insecure. Like, I'm hiring a sales leader, and I don't know how to fucking sell. Like, I'm hiring a finance leader, I don't know how to do finance. And yet, it's my responsibility to judge these people. Fuck, am I the right person to be CEO? Why don't we get someone who's good at judging these people into the CEO role? Turns out all that other stuff, like I've been going through the judgment and the sales, all that can be learned. You can learn that, and you have a very special position as a founder, and you should absolutely leverage that, because the technical knowledge and the long-term commitment, that stuff is irreplaceable, but all this judgment and sales stuff, like you can learn that over time. But I've seen so many founders quit when it gets to that point because they're like, oh, I just wanted to run a small team, and I don't want to run a scaled thing with executives, and these executives are better than me, and should I even be here? And it causes, I had deep insecurity. I remember I had this email I sent to the YC partners being like, man, shit, like these people are better than me. They're better leaders than me. They're more inspiring. Like, I had this one guy, this one sales leader who would like, I remember I was thinking like, hey, how do I run meetings more effectively? And I'm like, man, I just got to be better prepared, 15 years later, I'm still doing this presentation last minute before you guys. So I was like, oh, I just got to focus and be disciplined and prepared. And if I'm just extra prepared. And then I'd watch this guy, and he'd like not prepare at all. He'd fucking waltz into meetings, and he'd be incredibly inspiring, make key decisions, drive alignment, and like get things done. And I'm like, fuck, like I suck compared to this guy. Like I'm terrible. But again, as it turns out, all that stuff can be learned over time. All that stuff can be learned over the time. So don't quit. You'll learn that too. All right, next big drop-off point. After you get some success, at some point your growth is going to slow, and potentially slow in a big way. A lot of people, again, quit there because it's like, man, this was all hype, and everyone, we were on the cover of Forbes, or, we had a really great set of articles about us, and we have all these customers calling in, and all these investors want to put money in, and we're the darling of the ecosystem, and all of a sudden, hey, you hit a slowdown in growth, and they move on to the next hot company, and, you're just left by the side of the road, and you're like, man, fuck, like this feels bad. It feels emotionally bad. Every single successful company ever has been through that. We've been through that multiple times. We actually had an executive who had signed an offer letter to come join the team, but then 2 weeks before he was supposed to start, reneged on the offer. And I had to step in to lead the sales team. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. But again, I was like, okay, hey, no path but through on this. So like, it may feel bad and it may suck. Honestly, like every 3 years since starting the business, every 3 years, there's been like a 6 to 12 month period where it's like, hey, this is terrible. I cannot do this. Like, if this is indefinite, I'd have to leave the business. But all of those stuff ends up passing and you figure it out. So don't quit. Just don't quit. 50% of the success is showing up, as they say. Let me show you the last one that was absolutely fucking brutal. This is our wonderful, did anyone look this up before they came to my talk, by the way? I'm always curious. Okay, we got 2 folks here. Okay, so this is our wonderful stock price chart. I actually make a point to everyone at Amplitude just not to look at this all the time. We kind of went out crazy high. We went out around a little over $50 a share. We got to a high of $80 a share. Now we're sitting, we were low as like 8-ish at one point, I think. And now we're sitting pretty at 12. And so the company once was worth 7 times, okay, what it is today, all right? So like massively more than what it is today. Now, in retrospect, it was a mistake. We didn't understand what was happening in the business. We didn't do a good job of communicating that out to public markets. We should have tempered expectations more, all of that. But we still have a great business. We're a leader in the digital analytics. We have a $300 million in revenue business. We see the path to get that to $1 billion. As we do that and as that happens, this will go up over time and all of that. But a lot of founders, guess what? They'll quit. This is very demoralizing for the team. Owning this, because a lot of their net worth is tied up in shares. One of the really stupid fucking things, I'll tell you guys, as I'm very confident some folks in this audience will go on to start companies that go public, is you can't actually, I wish I knew it was high at this point, but you're not actually allowed to tell people to sell. Because it's like you're coordinating with other market participants, you get in trouble with the SEC. I wish I had just been more straight with members of the team that look, this is high, you really should sell and make sure you're taken care of in terms of your cash needs and everything else. I had to do it more indirectly, unfortunately, and that led to not as many people doing it as I had wished. Okay, all right, let me show you a kind of another phenomenal example that was much more extreme than us. Okay, so this blue line is Cisco. This wonderful chart here is, actually, hold up. Let's get that redone. Okay. Oh man, 1 second, guys. Should never have quit. Should never have quit the view. Hold on. All right, we'll get it back. 1 second. All right, there we go. We got it. Strong technical skills 15 years later. I'm still doing, whenever in our executive team meetings or board meetings, Zoom or IT shit fucks up, they're always like, Spencer, fix this thing. And so I'm like, all right, good to know I still got it all these years later. There were about 24 years where NVIDIA was basically worthless as a public company, all the way from 1989 to about 2013. Where it was like, I think less than one thousandth of what it was today. And on that 24-year period, there were I remember hearing this there were 4 separate times when their stock was sub $1. And the company was basically worthless. Today, you look at it, right? One of the largest, multi-trillion dollar, actually, what's the market cap of NVIDIA? $3 trillion? Okay, there we go. So it's $3 trillion business, right? Now there's, I don't want to compare, it's not to say, if you're worthless, you're going to build a $3 trillion company. But there's cycles to hardware and there's all sorts of dynamics that make this stuff happen. But a big part of Jensen actually got the opportunity to see him speak about a year ago. One of the most interesting things about his personality is he had almost this fatalistic humor about what was going to happen to him and NVIDIA. And he was like, yeah, it's horrible and painful and terrible, and that's great. I'm so happy. And it was just kind of drumming that ethos into his brain, into his team's brain, was the kind of core part of his leadership. So I'll tell you the thing that my number one recommendation here, the thing I did that has kept me steady all these years, is you've got to connect to something that's greater purpose than success in itself. You have to be validated. You can't be validated by outward things. You have to be on a mission for something greater. As I said at the start, I'm a huge believer in the power of technology to improve people's lives, and that's why I'm doing Amplitude. And so that has kept me going. All these people could leave me tomorrow, and I'm still working on this thing, and I'm cool with it. So you have to have that. You have to have some intrinsic motivation that's beyond being rich or some success in order to see this through. And if you do, you will then get to the outsized success. Okay, so that's my talk. 3 lessons on how to beat the Ivy League in career success. Learn how to sell, judge and be judged, and don't quit. Last thing I want to leave you with is we are so fucking close here at MIT, okay? We're number 2 U.S. News and World Report, right behind Princeton. This list on the left, this is the number of MIT billionaires. So we're kind of, we're working our way up, 5th on the list now. We got some fantastic folks that are kind of on the cusp of potentially building this. So this is Alexander Wang, CEO of Scale AI, one of the premier hot AI companies in Silicon Valley. He was actually, the funny story, He was actually, they almost tried to hire him as interim CEO of OpenAI, but he turned it down. So MIT alum. So this is Matt Huang. He was my year at MIT. He runs the premier crypto venture capital fund, has done incredibly well, as you'd imagined. Another group, the Cursor founders, I think they're MIT 22, so graduated just a few years ago. Now basically the software agent for helping you code and create great stuff. Incredible success very, very quickly. Another one I want to talk to you, and this goes to the point of, hey, you don't got to be the CTO, is Shuo. So Shuo Wang was a few years after me. She started this company called Deal. It makes HR software, and she's the chief revenue officer there. One of the fastest growing, 1 to 100 million in 20 months. That was record breaking at the time. And she leads all the sales process. So incredibly smart, incredibly technical person, but she leads the business side of their business. So again, don't think you can't do it. Any one of you absolutely could be exceptional salespeople and exceptional leaders. Lastly, there is a long tradition of folks coming out of MIT building leading technology companies. So just a few highlights here. The IBM founders, 2 of them, were actually MIT alums way back in the day. IBM is the OG. They might not be as cool these days, but they are the OG technology company that thought they could build a business around building great technology. Next up, Hewlett-Packard. Hewlett-Packard is kind of the godfather of Silicon Valley in that, so many companies can trace their lineage back to this in some way. Apple, tons of others, Cisco, tons of others. They actually were one of the really cool. The founder, I think, Bill Hewlett, is an MIT alum, and then one of the really cool things they did is that they were actually the first tech company to create employee option programs. So the fact that employees can participate in the upside and success of a company is thanks actually to HP, and they were part of the change in making change on that. Other great folks, TSMC, Morris Chang. They're right on the cusp of a billion-dollar company. Jim Simons, basically the most successful finance quant in all of history, also fantastic MIT alum. Also AMD CEO and Broadcom CEO Hock and Lisa, also fantastic MIT alums in positions of power. So I hope that now that I'm 15 years out, if I come back another 15 years from now, there's a founder who's saying, hey, how I built a billion-dollar company or a trillion-dollar company as an MIT alum, and I know it absolutely could be anyone in this room. So thank you all. That is my talk on how to beat the Ivy League in career success. Awesome. I went a little over on time, but I do want to spend just a little bit of time with questions and, curious what's top of your mind and how I can help set you up for success in the future on your career. Yes, way in the back over there. How did I meet my wife? Wow, okay. Well, you're going to have to come to the happy hour to hear the full story of how I met my wife. But I was lucky enough that she actually found me. And I had sworn off relationships in the early days of Amplitude because I was just so hyper-focused on building a successful business, and all the relationships I had just didn't work out specifically because of that. So I was like, all right, whatever, I'll just do this in 10 years later on in life, and I'll figure out how to find the right life partner. I happened to meet Anne as a friend at the time, and she was, I don't know what she saw in me, but she was incredibly persistent, and we ended up working out, and here we are 9 years later, successful company, the whole thing works. I think part of the thing that I've been very, very lucky is that she's also very oriented, both herself around career success and our partnership around how we can create something joint in that way, and that happened to work out incredibly well. So I ended up having to mature a lot more quickly than I expected in a lot of different ways in terms of being a great life partner, and but it's happened to work out wonderfully well for the both of us. I'll tell you the full story is funny. I'll tell you for anyone who comes to the happy hour. All right, other questions? Yes.
Is it also possible to get venture funded on the East Coast, not just in Silicon Valley, or is it one thing?
So the question is it possible to get venture funded on the East Coast, not just in Silicon Valley? Yes, it definitely is. You know, there are lots of great companies that are started out here. HubSpot is a great example, start by some Sloan graduates. There's a bunch of others. You know, there's Route 28, where there's 128, where there's a lot of great startups that have come out of that. I would strongly recommend, though, if you are optimizing for career success, you do make your way out there and work there in person at some point, because the ecosystem of executives, of help and folks like Eric who can help you judge and experience doing it is just much larger. It's at least an order of magnitude bigger. Now you can absolutely get investors from Silicon Valley out here, but it's just there's a lot that becomes much easier in terms of talent, in terms of being around an ecosystem. Like Y Combinator actually started out doing half of their sessions here in Boston and half of them in Silicon Valley, but pretty quickly realized the right move was to permanently do it in Silicon Valley. Because there were a lot of Harvard and MIT folks. So my strong recommendation, is if your goal, again, a lot of other great goals in life besides career success, but if your goal is to maximize career success, like you absolutely should be going out to the Bay Area. For sure. Yes?
Where do you see Amplitude in 10 years? And if you have like specific goals that you're working forward, yeah?
Absolutely. So the really exciting thing about what we do at Amplitude is that we help you understand how people are using the product. And it's a superpower. Never before in the history of product development have you been able to do that. You kind of build some product and give it to users, and you don't really know how they're using it. It's just like you're kind of throwing it over the fence. You're blind to that. Or even software, before the internet was very much like that. And so the fact that product creators have real-time access to that data is incredible. Is like an incredible superpower. I think you've seen the companies, some of the last great companies. Like you look at Facebook and Netflix, both mastered that superpower more. Like Facebook understood that how many friends you added was key to their success. Netflix understood how to recommend and create content better for you than anyone else. And so we want to bring that superpower to every business out there. We are very, very early on that. Right now, the majority of our revenue comes from technology companies. There's a few non-tech companies that are using us in big ways, but it's still incredibly early there. And so we want to go do that. We're actually, there's a previous generation of our software that is sold by Adobe. And so we think of like, hey, if we do it right, we can go displace them at a lot of other businesses out there and build a multi-billion-dollar business. And frankly, make products that that are much better adapted to all of us as people. One of the interesting things about technology is that, outside of this room, while we all love technology, technology is an incredibly frustrating thing for the average person. Like it doesn't work how it's supposed to. It's frustrating to them. There's all sorts of issues with it. And one of the things we want to do is like really technology should be a lot more adaptive to you as a human. And so that's what we're building at Amplitude is like, let's build the infrastructure to enable every business to do that. Now it's very, very early in it. It's still like you have to learn this arcane analytics language and think about events and all this other stuff and all this very technical knowledge in order to do this well. But when I think 10 years from now, it's like, I think we want to be the engine that powers a lot of great products out there. And we're in the early days of that now. So for sure. Yes.
What's your approach to leadership, like taking a team of people and pointing them in the direction of achieving something? And how has that changed from early stage to
That is a great question. So how has my approach to leadership changed from the early days to where we are now? Oh, that is a really great question. There's this great quote that talks about how to organize a group of people to build a ship. And it talks about how if you want people to build a ship, don't like give orders, direct people to chop down wood, tell them what to do. Instead, get them to yearn for the vast and endless sea. And one of the things that I have realized is incredibly important for me as a leader is to help people understand how the future can be amazing and we can be a part of making that happen. And so, right, so, that question of where Amplitude 10 years from now, I'm not really thinking, like, yeah, there's the, like, okay, how big is the business and this? What I'm really thinking about is, hey, how are we changing the way we interface with technology? And that's something that you can connect with on a much deeper and more emotional human level and rally behind. And I think in the early days, I was very, like, execution focused. Like, what feature do we have to build? What deal do we have to win? Like, what hire do we have to make? And I was like, do this, do this, do this, do this. But you realize it's a lot more powerful as a leader to inspire. It starts with the what can we achieve and how do you inspire someone emotionally, and everything else can follow from that. Look, the debate on what feature to build or what deal to close or who, like, that can all, and so a huge part of my role and my leadership style has been embracing that. I was like a hyper rationalist. I was like, that's stupid. Like, who cares about emotion? But it's actually incredibly important as a leader. Great question. Yes. How do you reach the first few customers as a startup? Okay, so there is no kind of universal way, and if you look at the history of Amplitude or any company, you realize how bespoke it is. I'll tell you how we did it, just as a data point, but you kind of realize that there's many, many different paths. So we spent a year in the first year of Amplitude just begging other startup founders to use it. And frankly, I didn't have the confidence to ask for money because I knew deep down that if I did, none of them would use it. I'd be like, oh, well, then we'll go to 0 users. Do I really want that? But it actually should have, because then it would have allowed me to be like, okay, where else can I talk to users? The way we found Brett, the very first sale I made, was actually an investor intro. So it's random. Like, I didn't expect to get it. It was like, hey, I know this guy's interested in analytics. You guys want to talk? So show up, do the demo, realize, oh shit, I'm being asked how much does this cost? And then that was the first sale. And then what he did was there was this network of Zynga alumni that really were used to having great analytics, but then didn't. When they were starting their own companies, they were desperate to use anything, even from a no-name company with no product, no track record, no brand, and nothing to it, and were willing to take the risk. And so about half of the first companies that we sold to, like 5 of the first 10, came from that network, and finding people who were similar to him. And so, like, if I were to redo it again, what I would have done is like just been asked all of them, hey, just pay us $1,000 a month. They'd all said no. I'm like, all right, how do we find more? And just keep hunting until I found Brett or someone like him. And then from there, I'd be like, okay, how do I create more Bretts? Okay, great. Oh, other Zynga alums who would be interested in this. Who can I talk to? We got others from other ways, like our TechCrunch launch brought in like 2 or 3 customers that talked to us. And then it started compounding. Other people hear about you in different ways, and it kind of starts compounding from there. But finding that first one is incredibly hard. I mean, we didn't get that, until a year in from Amplitude. I wish we had focused on that a lot earlier because we would have wasted a lot less time. But frankly, one of the hardest sales things. By the way, on the learn how to sell, one warning to everyone here: the first sale is incredibly demoralizing because you have to probably go. We had to go through 30 no's. Or actually more than that, probably 50 or 100 no's before we got to that first yes. But that's fine. Like, we had conviction. We knew that this technology should exist. We just needed to find someone who was interested in buying it. And so we just kept looking and kept looking. One of the big patterns I see in terms of the quitting is that they'll be like, oh yeah, there were 3 customers. I was reading this Hacker News thread last week, and they were like, oh, there were 3 customers who signed LOI saying they're going to do it. And all 3 said, no, and after we got funding, so we just gave up. And I'm like, 3 that said no? Are you fucking kidding me? Go out and get 100 that say no, and then tell me you can't build a business around it. So like, and this is one of the things you learn as part of being a salesperson. You just get through the no's and brush them off, and you just move on, and you have to get through a lot of them to get to the thing that you want. So, yeah, cool. Yes.
How did you get from course 20 to Battlecode to a software company?
Long story. I wish I had just switched to course 6 much earlier. So how did I get from course 20 to Battlecode to a software company? I wish I had just switched to course 6 earlier. I was just I had too much of an ego and was too stupid. I was like, man, I'm already like 20 years old doing this Course 20 degree. Like my career, like I might as well just, I'm committed at this point. I might as well just see it through, which was very silly reasoning at the time. I had always been interested in programming. I just did some fun on the side. I had learned some in high school, and then I built my own computer. I had my own IT support business around my neighborhood growing up, and so it was a kind of nice way to make money on the side. And so it was always an interest in mine. And so I would take a few Course 6 courses. Like I took, you guys aren't even, like 655. I don't know, they probably changed the number scheming by this point. But I took a bunch of computer science courses in addition to Course 20 on the side. And I remember every single year, I was like, man, I should just switch to Course 6. But I was like, oh no, I'm too committed at this point. I remember thinking like a third of MIT was Course 6. And I'm like, oh, I want to be different and cool. Like I'm not like them. Like I'm going to do my own thing. This Course 20 thing that nobody does, like I'll do that. I learned some cool stuff from Course 20. But I even all the way up to my senior year. And then my senior year, I think I would have had to take 7 classes in a semester. I'm like, that's too much. It's fine. It's fine. Like I'll take as many as I can just to learn. So I never took like compilers or systems or some of the more advanced stuff. But I did take a bunch of the basics. Battlecode was honestly just a lucky accident in that it combined. I did it my sophomore year, and we didn't do very well. But it combined a lot of things I liked a lot. So one is just programming. The second is like you're programming AI for this video game. I was really into StarCraft at the time. And then the third is it's a competition. And so you kind of compete. I'm a competitive person. And then you also get recognized, like, all these companies. So I'm like, wow, this is like super cool. This is like way more interesting than anything else I've come across at MIT. And so my junior year, I like went all in on it. I like prepared on the previous year's code just by doing it myself a month before the real competition. I tried to recruit a team to work with me. My roommate, one of this guy's named Steve Bartell, actually worked with me at the time. I actually tried to get Curtis, my current co-founder, to work with me, but he's like, no, he's like a very loyal guy. So he's like, no, I already committed to this other team. And so we ended up having to be rivals that year. And I reminded him of that later when I was starting Amplitude. I'm like, hey, you don't want to miss out, the next time we do something cool together. So it all ended up working out. And then that led to Battlecode, and then through Battlecode, I learned a lot about people, former competitors starting companies. So like the founders of Dropbox, Drew and Arash, came out of Battlecode. Aaron Iba, the founder of Etherpad and YC partner at the time, came out of it. There was another company, Tvox. There was like a whole bunch of them that had come out of that. And so it led me to considering that seriously as a career path. And so I just spent a lot of my senior year studying, just learning about what it took to build companies. And ended up through some of the detours I talked about earlier, but ended up going on to this. I'll tell you a funny story as well about programming with Curtis. So there was one point in early Amplitude's history where I wanted to prove I was at least close to being his level of programmer. And so I'm like, all right, I'm not going to do anything this month except just focus on hacking, and like that's it, which mistake in retrospect, but I was like competitive and I wanted to show I'm at least somewhat worthy of being on the same programming team as him. And so I focused the entire month on just like coding, shipping as much as I could. I got to the end of the month, and there's this GitHub stats thing we looked at, and on every single metric, Curtis was like twice as much as me. So it was like number of commits, twice as much. Lines of code touch, twice as much. Coverage, percent coverage of the code space, twice as much. And I was like, you know what? It's fine. I'm just worse. I'm going to accept that and move on, and we'll do other things. So, for sure. Oh, it's coming to an end. Okay. No problem. Okay.
You guys can come to row 34.
Yes, okay, so we're going to do happy hour now at row 34. It's just, I don't know exactly where it is relative to this room. I think a few blocks that way. We'll be heading over. We got food, drinks, hang out with myself. We also have members of the Amplitude team. Can you raise your hand? What's that? Oh, Jin went already there. And then this is Kevin, who's a founding engineer at Amplitude. Last thing I'll say to this group, and then I'd love to see you over there, is like, if you're interested in startups, come talk to me, reach out. Very happy to help and pay it forward. If you're interested in what we're doing at Amplitude, I'd love to work with any one of you. So come talk to us, and we'd love to. We have a bunch of interview spots later this week at X-Fair, so we'd love to sign you up for one of those. Or if you can't make that and you're from another school, let's get you signed up. But thank you again. I hope to see many of you 15 years from now giving a talk about how to be the first MIT alum who's built a $1 trillion company. Thank you all.